happy Wednesday, everyone. And let's go ahead and get started. I'm so thrilled to see you all and have you join us for this edition of Rebel 11. I am thrilled to have Michelle Jungmin Bank here with us today. She is an award-winning ecopreneur and Harvard Business School graduate who spent 16 years living in Asia as a Korean American from New York City. She is the author of SUN SSUKGAT, a wellness guide covering her research, interviews, and personal eco-conscious journey in uncovering centuries-old well-being traditions from her time in Asia and Korea, where scientists project its people will top longevity charts by 2030 or in 2030, and we're going to find out why. Welcome, Michelle. It's so great to see you today.
I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I have to say that this book of yours has been such an amazing journey for me. And not only did it touch my heart in so many ways, but it was such an educational tool for me as I read through it and has already changed some of the things in my life and the way I plan to live moving forward.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, it's just fabulous. So the subtitle is The Korean Art of Self-Care, Wellness, and Longevity. And I can't say enough about this book. Also, I want to note that Michelle did all of the beautiful images in the book as well. So you'll also see her creative side. But Michelle, I want, this book is all about living, food as medicine, wellness, and longevity. And there's a quote in the back of the book from Thomas Edison many, many years ago, which I think you are touching upon now. And his quote was, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patient in the care of the human frame, in diet, and the cause and prevention of disease." And that is what you're really talking about. But before we get into the mechanics of your studies, let's talk about you and your story. Will you share what took you on this journey?
Yeah. By way of background, I am a Korean American and I was raised and born in Brooklyn. So when I was writing this book, it was very much, from a perspective of sitting between East and West worlds. And as you mentioned, I'm a social impact entrepreneur. I'm a Harvard Business School graduate, and I later trained in 2 functional food programs, focusing on holistic preventative care, which extends into healthy aging and mother-baby care. But sort of the interesting thing that I tied back to was that, and I didn't really value it until much later, is that I grew up in a world of medicine. So my father is a US-based doctor trained at a top medical school in Korea. It's extremely hard to get into, 0.8%, acceptance rate. But, because we immigrated to the US with a, a huge cohort of his friends and alums from the same school, I had this extended family of, these Korean doctors, and it just really exposed me so early on to the practical and holistic applications of medicine, which is actually deeply embedded within Korean culture. For example, we use whole foods to recover from pregnancies, from injuries, from surgeries, from colds. It is something that I don't even think, a lot of us, when we go back and look into what we were doing, there weren't really words. It was just a way of living. And later, I married into a traditional Chinese family that embodied these nourishing traditions passed down generationally. And so we do split our time, since 2 decades ago. I've been sort of, I feel like Hong Kong is my second home, New York City is my first, and yeah, I'm very much in between both of the worlds. And so my children are growing up in that as well. So that's my background. And when I embarked on um, learning more about, East-West medicine and kind of preventative care, and writing this book, which actually wasn't my original intention. I was just more of a, It was more of a personal exploration that was born out of my experiences. I was in
And
Hong Kong.
you had a significant health crisis
Exactly. So
that
I was
took
just
you
about
on
to go
this
into that.
journey.
I had launched a sort of a dream social impact startup. We were winning awards and experiencing tremendous growth. And I was just very deeply passionate about what I was doing. And, I think so often when we are focused on our goals where, I was working around the clock and really I was too busy to sleep or to eat. And I was running on black coffee. And in the middle of all of that success, I actually landed in the emergency room for the first time in my life. And, it wasn't really about the acute episode that I had, landing in the hospital. It was more what happened afterwards, and sort of the realizations that I experienced afterwards. So I learned that the doctors had put a camera down my throat and into my stomach, and very little of my gut lining had actually remained healthy. But the more, sort of overwhelming thing was that when I returned home, I was really ill constantly. And then I realized that this health problem had been actually brewing underneath the surface for a really long time. It's sort of like if you were to picture, an iceberg, I was the picture of health on the outside. And then underneath, the roots of my foundations had all really fallen away and I hadn't really noticed it. I think I had trained myself to just work through the aches and pains and not really listen to my body. And, at the time that I had landed in the hospital, my body was sort of screaming that I needed to do something to make it better. So it led me on this long journey to kind of, learn a lot more. And did you want me to go into that? I just started, I was living in Hong Kong. I started realizing it was just a completely different way of life that was more kind of radically simple in the ways that they were thinking about wellness. And I started interviewing some people just very casually because, I noticed a lot of people just doing things that are very foreign to, me as an American. Like, there was a grandmother on the street and she was like in her 90s, wielding a very heavy sword for exercise. And it was just a very, it's just
Right.
their way of life. Like
Mhm.
there's like a different mindset about the way of living. And so it kind of like led me more and more down the rabbit hole and it led me to travel and then ultimately reconnect with my Korean heritage.
Which is so beautiful. We spoke earlier this week, and I was telling Michelle that I had a significant experience when I was under a lot of pressure early in my career, and where I was in and out of the hospital 4 times in 2 years because I was under an immense amount of stress, primarily from a person that I was working with. And, my body was screaming out, as you mentioned, Michelle, that my body knew before I did the impact that this situation was having on me. And, I haven't been in the hospital since, and like you, have explored different ways of living. But tell us more about that journey, and really what you found about this ancient wisdom, this
Mhm.
connection between how people are living in Korea today versus, like, say, how we're living here in the United States.
So, when I started formalizing my training, I was looking more into Eastern medicine, and it really is all about learning about ways to try to maximize the ways that your body was meant to function and to repair itself. I think very often in Western medicine, we are focused on treating the symptoms after they arrive. And, often
Popping a
with
pill.
pharmaceuticals that are for we go straight to the pill, and it's not to say that I think in Asia, when you're looking at the way they're looking at healthcare and well-being, it is more of an integrative function where Eastern medicine, it's like this whole integrated whole body mind spirit approach with an emphasis on finding the root cause of illness and more oriented on prevention and self-care. Actually, when I was starting to take a look at how to live better, and sort of, if you will, longevity rates, And I say, longevity with sort of quotes because I feel like, you can't guarantee how many number of years you're going to be living, but you can guarantee the years that you're living are going to be much better, and that's what, is called health span. And so it is very much about prevention and self-care. And I found that that is actually the solution to their longevity, why, they're living so well. Their obesity rates are, in the single digits. They're very focused on proactively looking after themselves every day with little steps.
One of the things that we were discussing earlier this week was, we are living in this 24-hour digital culture with so many societal pulls around success and, moving up the ladder, the career ladder, and, go, go, go. And we very rarely turn off. And we were also discussing it's like how women, you and I, and all women out there are, we're nurturers and we take care of everyone else first. And for us as women, it's even harder to define what self-care is and what it means to us. And you have a new definition, or you think that we should redefine self-care. And what does that mean to you when you say we need to redefine it?
I think that, in our digital social media world, self-care has sort of morphed into this idea of external beauty. And actually, it is a medically defined term by the Cleveland Clinic, by the Mayo Clinic, all of the top health organizations as something that is really important for healthcare. And it's something that really attacks these staggering rates that we're starting to see in the modern world that are the World Health Organization actually estimates that we have over 70% of chronic illnesses that they deem preventable by positive lifestyle changes, and that is actually staggering. Self-care is actually, it's just all of the million things that you can do to proactively take care of your health and well-being, your mind, body, and spirit. And, I feel like a long time ago, before I started writing the book, I actually used to really discount this. I so often, as you say, mothers or nurturers, I'm a mother of two children. I really put everyone in front of us, especially if you're a leader of your household, you're leading your teams, you're very passionate about the mission, everything comes before you. And actually, I realized that sustained, growth for organizations, sustained leadership, even, just being a good parent, I think, is, just kind of respecting that you have to take care of yourself as well. It's kind of like the analogy of if you are on an airplane and you have these air masks, you do need to put it on yourself so that you can take care of your children, on the plane. So it really is like that. It's just these little steps that you take so that you can continue functioning, because we do live in this 24/7 digital culture where, our phones are scrolling, we have the beauty of technology, which is ongoing, but our human bodies actually do need periodic rest. It's not that we can't continue to go after our dreams, it's that we do need to take periodic breaks in order for our bodies to continue functioning properly.
So important. We need to slow down and look within and take care of what's inside. I read a book many years ago. It was called All Sickness is Homesickness, meaning that you need to take care of your body first, meaning your home first, like
Yeah, I
what's
agree with that.
inside. So Michelle broke her book out into several chapters: soil, sun, water, and care. And I thought that we would talk first about food, because food is such an important component of health, and looking at food as medicine. And that's something in Korea that is really defined as a part of the culture, that what you put in your body matters. So let's talk about that first.
It really dates back to ancient times. It goes back to sort of a complicated Korean word called yakshik dongwon. And that literally means food is medicine. And food is, an important aspect. It drives our biochemistry in a lot of ways. But it speaks to a way of life that is going back to what are all of the different steps that you can take naturally to repair your body, so it does symbolize that preventative, proactive approach to healthcare. And it's the idea that, and it's very fundamental in Korean culture, that healthcare starts with nutritious foods, and all of these holistic measures first. We first start that. And I think that's the first step we often forget to take. And then secondarily, if something, if things aren't improving, that, you move into advanced medical treatment. So it's a very different approach to going straight to the pill. It's the idea of trying to, and this is something that was really emphasized by the Buddhist nuns that I learned from. They know if they get sick and, have a cold, for example, it will take some time for your body to heal, like 7 to 10 days. So they start with these nutritious foods first and then try to see if they can improve over time before going into, more advanced medical treatment. And it actually dates back to a long time ago in Korea. They were very focused on, promoting the longevity of the king and the royal family. And I feel like it was a very sort of futuristic, model where the king would use his physicians, his royal physicians, and they would work in a team to promote the longevity of the king with the cooks. So they were very intent on, recording how the king was feeling, and then that would go back into the kitchen and what he would eat for the day. So I thought that was really important because it's an idea that is just now burgeoning in healthcare. It's called culinary medicine, but really we were doing it a long time ago.
That's so true. And just think about, them trying to keep him alive, and we can take those notes from what happened there in the kitchen for us today. And so you also spent a lot of time in temples, and you said like what you were learning from the nuns. Can you tell us more about that? You call it temple food.
So, temple food is a very traditional way of cooking. And, it is a very simple way of just, using indigenous plants that are around you. So the Buddhist nuns, the ones that I met, they're living remotely in a hermitage that's in a forest. And so they're, digging around for the mushrooms that are growing in the forest, but they also, grow a lot of sort of greens and produce in their gardens. And I found this, the way they were cooking was just so approachable because it wasn't this artisanal way of, beautifully presenting all of these things. It was just very simple. They were using produce, and the idea was the cooking time was actually quite simple because when you think about, cooking, it does help with digestibility, and it is actually all about digestion in temple food. They're helping you to prepare foods in a way that is easy to digest because digestion actually takes a lot of energy from us. And so in the ways that we can help to digest it properly, to, absorb the nutrients properly, we're gaining the best from all the foods that we're ingesting. So they are very gently cooking the produce, whether it's light sauteing or, a quick blanching. And then what they do to make it really delicious is these fermented condiments. So I kept, when I was learning from them, I kept thinking, oh, actually, their secret is this little lazy Susan that they keep going back to because the ingredients aren't, it's not rocket science, but what they're doing is they're going back into this lazy Susan, and this actually has, what I call the foundation of their longevity pantry. And not only does it significantly boost, health benefits, but, it's actually really quite delicious. So it includes things like the bedrock of Asian culture is all of these condiments that come from fermented soybeans. So there's something called doenjang, which is a fermented bean paste. And, gochujang is something that is more familiar, in the Western world and or being more introduced, but that is a red chili paste. And then they use traditionally brewed kanjang, which is soy sauce. And they are employing the probiotics and putting that into the produce to make it taste really good. They are also using a lot of seasonal fruits and vinegars. So that's what, after sort of watching what they were doing, I started employing that a lot myself.
So their table or their plate looks much different than a Western plate would be. And I like how you put in the book a drawing of the Western plate with, our plate right here and a spoon and a fork and a knife. But then the Korean plate would be with all of these different elements that are so important to digestion and addition. And you also mentioned that it's mostly plant-based. Is that true?
I mean, they eat meats, but the idea is that it is a plant diverse diet, and there's so many reasons why that is important. It's not only good for our health. There's something called the microbiome, which is trillions of a huge ecosystem of trillions of bacteria, viruses, organisms that are living all over our bodies, including our skin, our brain, inside our gut. And, our health is actually dependent on the balance that we keep in the microbiome. So all of these foods that they're employing in their diet, these ferments, they're actually helping to rebalance the microbiome. They're not using these scientific terms, when they're doing it. It's just embedded in the culture. But it's things like, that we know today, like kimchi, which is actually a really important, part of the cultural identity in Korean culture. They have about 200 varieties. But, if you take out chili, it's very simply sauerkraut. And we can all keep, a little jar in our refrigerator for that. But yeah, they're doing a lot of things for temple food. Their temple food is kind of interesting because, because they're Buddhist nuns, they stem away from some things that, kind of, it conflicts with their meditation practice, like, garlic or, onions, but yeah, they're still making it taste really good with these fermented condiments.
And so with the microbiome, it's so important to have plant diversity. And one thing that you talk a lot about here is, adding fruits, because you and I mentioned that we both have, had taken out fruits from our diet because of the sugars, but you brought them back in after studying more in Korea.
Yeah,
Diverse.
fruits are revered in Asian culture. They're given as gifts. So it kind of goes back to, you know, something that I started rediscovering. As an American, we're so used to, showing love by, kissing or hugging or saying I love you. But in Korean culture, it's really about the food, and it's these actions, that we impart to loved ones. And so fruit is a symbol of, well-being. And, it's also revered for its beauty because it comes in a lot of different colors. But, when you look at the health benefits of it, the colors actually, they represent different antioxidants that you're taking into your body. And, if you're thinking about fiber intake, it's an important element because if you're taking out fruit, you're taking out a lot of the plant diversity. I mean, one of the reasons why I put fruit back in is because I started noticing a lot of research that we as Americans focus, mainly on three crops: wheat, rice, and corn. But actually, there's over 300,000 edible plants in the world. So, fruits is a part of that. We're, often.
300,000. Just think about how little we go to the grocery store and buy, time and time again. One of the other things that I thought was so interesting is the concept of using the whole plant, that
Mhm.
many of the nutrients are lost by by Americans tossing out like the tops of carrots or not eating the potato skins. So can you talk about the philosophy of root to blossom or flower to root?
Yeah, so I feel like that's part of the plant diversity that I'm talking about because the whole plant philosophy is the idea of, it goes back to a long time ago. We were so much more connected to food and growing it and, kind of being a part of it in the natural world. And now, what we see as food is more, in a package format and, it's much more accessible to us. And we tend to waste it. 30% of what we produce is actually wasted. 50% of that actually ends up in the home. And part of that waste is not eating the peel. So the whole plant idea is eating the plant from flower to root and also the peel. And when you start taking a look at all of the data, and anybody can do this, they can go into the USDA food data and start to, compare apples versus apples with the peel, apples without the peel. And, it becomes really startling, when you start seeing that, for example, a raw apple with the skin contains about 300% more vitamin K, 50% more vitamin A, and the list goes on. I mean, it's the potato peel too. It's everything that you start noticing. Kiwis, for example, cucumbers, if you think about when you bring it back home, you're starting to peel it away. And so I often have to, even stop my children, my husband from peeling things because that's actually where all of the nutrient lies. And it's much more environmentally friendly when we keep the peel and we eat that.
And so talk to us about how we can create our longevity pantry here in the US and what that looks like. What does our modern day kitchen look like and what do we take away?
So I think that one of the most important lessons that I took from the Korean Buddhist nuns is just being mindful about what I'm eating. I mean, for them, it is very much a spiritual practice. And I started taking that really seriously. When I go into a grocery store, for example, I will actually look at the nutrients, the nutrition label, and see the ingredient list. And when you start home cooking, and not everybody loves to home cook, but I always encourage people to try to prepare food at least once because then you start seeing the role of the ingredients and actually what is not important, like food coloring or preservatives, things that are, helping to increase the shelf life of something that, is in the supermarket. So it is very much about this mindful approach in understanding what we're cooking.
Yeah, one of the tips that I think is so important is to shop on the outside of the grocery store, not the inside, because that's where all the packaged, ultra processed foods seem to live. So that was a tip that meant a lot to me. And one of the
Oh,
things that go ahead.
no, so I actually have to remind myself nowadays, because I'll go around the perimeter, which is actually where the produce is, and then I have to remind myself, actually, do I need to spend a little bit more time? Because that's where you find, all of the different things that are happening in the season. So, the season's bounties, and I make sure that I bring home a different produce, for the season, and we try it out. I feel like I'm trying to think like a mindset of like a modern day forager inside a supermarket because I don't live out in the wild, but I have a supermarket where I am in touch with a lot of different produce. I used to actually tend to just eat broccoli and carrots, but there's a lot of other, different greens like sukat or even, Asian greens like bok choy, which have a lot of nutrients that, we're missing when we don't try different things out. One of the things that I do with my longevity pantry is there's a lot of anti-inflammatory ingredients that are very, that are key in the Korean culture. So, for example, ginger is one of them that I never used to have before. And if you start looking at the young roots, you're increasing your, antioxidant load. So I will just very simply keep the peel on and put it in some warm water. I grate it, and it does actually really help a lot with my digestion. And, fruits is very much a part of my longevity pantry. Lemons is a part of my everyday. And then the other thing that is really important in Korean culture is jujubes. They're red dates. And you often can't find that in a regular supermarket, but you can find them dried. And it's very helpful for your circulatory systems. It goes back to the King's dossiers when you start taking a look at this encyclopedia of knowledge and ingredients that he kept for himself. Jujubes is one of them.
And the other thing that I took away and am inspired to do is to go and shop at more Asian grocery stores because you can get different types of vegetables there. And going back to the concept of increasing your microbiome, that diversity is really good. So I would highly encourage you to look locally for those options as well. So let's switch gears a little bit into the importance of being outside.
I think that's something that I was not doing. I like working, and there's a lot to do in front of the computer, but I wasn't going outside, and it's very far away from, the way we used to live, and I was reminded when I was going back to, visit and learn from all of these different cultures that that was an important element that I was missing so much in my daily living. And the reason why it's so important is because when we go outside and we're in touch with, sunshine, from sunshine, we are gaining, exposure to vitamin D, which, we're deficient in often in the modern world. But when we go outside and we're in touch with, fresh air and actually dirt, we're training our immune system to appropriately respond to what is in the natural world. I think when we live in these sterile environments, our bodies don't know how to respond. Um, so it goes back to this idea of terrain-based living, which is different from what I grew up with. I was always really afraid of germs because I, understood that germs cause disease, but it really is, what these people are doing is they're building their resiliency. They're building, the resiliency of the soil of their bodies, if you will, by terrain-based living. So it's this idea of, if you were to take two people who are exposed to, the same pathogens, one with, a stronger terrain versus another with a weaker terrain, the one with a stronger terrain is going to fare better, against this exposure to the pathogens. And I feel like that's an important concept, especially in our COVID world. There's a lot of things that are happening, things that we're being introduced to. But if we're able to, build a more resilient immune system by these simple things that we're doing, we talked about food. Going outside is one of them, kind of being exposed to what is naturally in our world. That is a very important part of it too.
And in the Korean culture, people tend to spend more time outdoors, right?
Yes. So
Yeah,
even teenagers are going out forest bathing, they're hiking, it's a very popular activity going camping. I think it's something that, we can do more as Americans, even at a younger age.
I think that would change this world a lot, and particularly here in the US. And with lifestyle, you mentioned there are several different medicines for a long life, and which include optimism, community, movement, rest, and of course, nutrition, which we discussed. But let's talk about optimism and how you see the difference between the Korean optimism and in the culture versus here in the US.
I think that this was apparent when I started taking a look at the centenarians in Asia. They are doing things that are, I have a picture that I like to show a lot of people. It's this free diver that is close to 75, and she's fighting an octopus. What she does for a living is she's foraging for seafood for a living. And she forages and then she sells it, and that's how she makes money. But she's diving into the cold water for, much of the year, fighting the elements like jellyfish and octopus. And they dive through their 90s. And this idea is that it's a very can-do spirit. It's this positive, idea, psychology of not limiting yourself. I think, that has really reversed, my mentality because I always had sort of this internal clock that I had a limited amount of time. And, I just started expanding my mindset, what is actually possible at an older age. And so optimism is very much a part of that.
And that's also how you talk to yourself. I recently had someone say to me, she was 55 and had just lost her job, and she's like, I'll never work a day in my life again. I'm like, well, if you have that attitude and that type of outlook on life, you probably won't. But if you see, like in Korea, all these centenarians doing all of these amazing things, whether they're, leading up to being in their hundreds, but in their 70s and 80s, like you're saying, that's inspiration. That changes our mindset about what's possible. And I think that is so beautiful. I don't
The other,
None of us feel our age, right? But we're
yeah.
told that we should be X, Y, and Z here in the States, if you're in your 60s or your 70s. And it doesn't seem like that's a lifestyle thing in Korea.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I felt was so important was that the wellness was cemented by community in Asia. So they're gathering together and they're not, they're free activities. They're gathering together outside in the parks. There's like these amazing, scenarios where you'll see people at 5 a.m., there's a corner, dancing flamingo, there's another corner doing badminton, and they're all doing these really sort of nature-based things and they're looking forward to every day. It gives them purpose, but they're also, tied to this more sustainable lifestyle because, it's being cemented by community. And that goes back to the idea of Korean jung. So that's a word that is very ever present in Korean culture. And it's a very complex idea that gathers a lot of English words at once. Like it means love, friendship, compassion. And it's this idea of just really helping one another, even if you're strangers in Korean society. So if you look in Korean history, it's a call to action to really help society. It's idea that each individual can contribute to the fabric of your community. So when they were in a financial crisis, they, very, very much felt called to go back to their homes, take their gold personal jewelry to help one another save the country out of, national, financial crisis. You've seen it time and time again, during COVID, the country has gone to food, zero food waste because they understood that, garbage was, filling up in their country. And so there's this individual contribution to this idea of family, and family for them really, it extends into community, into, society. And it very much is what I think cements wellness in Korean culture.
I love that so much. Let's change the US culture to be more that way. We're so isolated here, it feels like. And then the importance of rest.
Mhm. Rest is, our bodies are not meant to work, 24/7. So, I feel like that is a very important aspect that I now start to employ, even after I'm working for 30 minutes, I will actually start um, just resting my body, for even for a few seconds to take a deep breath and be mindful about, what steps I'm taking next. And rest, is not just sleep. It's also taking a rest in terms of your digestion. So when I was sick, I started realizing that, for example, I wasn't having a restful sleep if I was eating too close to sleep. And your body needs breaks. So I started noticing that I needed a window before I was sleeping to, make sure that I was having a digestive break as well.
That's so important. And is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience today that I haven't asked, that were some of your key takeaways?
I think that my book was very much an invitation for me to ask questions about my own culture, about, my identity. And I feel like, everyone can do that. They can go back. There's so much that is just, not questioned. It's just, sort of how you grew up, and you don't really connect the dots until maybe you don't. But it's just, it's this idea that something happened to me and I was able to go back and sort of ask a lot of questions to my family and realize that, what I was growing up with, there was so much wisdom. So I think everyone can do that. The other thing too is that, I've actually changed a lot by just walking outside. Walking in and of itself, I used to be more of a hardworking gym person. And it's really, if you start taking a look at the longevity rates across Asia, it's really the steps. steps inside, whether you're cleaning or, doing your errands, or step outside, which helps you so much in terms of just being exposed to nature and being, reconnected to the world. I think walking has actually really transformed a lot of, the ways that I feel more energetic and actually more fit. And I do it after, meals to help me with digestion as well.
And do you try to do that multiple times a day?
Yeah, I do. And it's very easy. You can get off the subway earlier, one step earlier and take a little bit more steps. Or I feel so much more energetic if I start, walking outside more. Yeah, I do it multiple times a day.
Mhm. And so in writing this book, it was such a journey for you and exploring your culture, but you also explored your creative side during your exploration. So can you tell us a little bit about what inspired that?
So as a child, I was very artistic. I was always making things and crafting, and I was also very musical. I played the piano and oboe. I actually almost attended music school professionally. So I feel like the book is very much like a culmination of all of these different things. I read a lot. I didn't necessarily, I didn't have a writing platform. It was just all sort of, I almost also actually almost went and followed my father's footsteps to go into medicine, but I ended up doing, the industry's business side in healthcare investment banking, covering biotech and pharma. So it's very much, it was like a natural step for me. I was exploring, I was writing these little essays for myself. And as part of the note taking, I was just illustrating with a pen. And when I went into these editorial acquisition meetings, I took everything with me. It was sort of a very messy thing because it was just a natural process for me. And it was very clear to them that the drawings needed to be part of the book. So that was a nice surprise for me.
And it's all come together so beautifully. You said that there's been so much success with this book, and tell our audience about, like, it's going to be translated into how many different languages?
Mhm. So the book just launched yesterday, and it's already been translated into German, Italian, Spanish, and I have 5 publishing deals. HarperCollins is my lead, and then Hachette in the UK. The other thing too, which has been so fascinating, has been I've been invited to a lot of organizations to talk about my book. They're just very interested. So, for example, Google, I'm set to speak with Google, but they want to have their kitchen make 4 of the book's recipes so that they can try it out as I'm speaking and just really understand, what the book is about.
And I failed to mention that there's beautiful recipes in this book as well. I can't tell you enough about how fabulous this book is on so many different levels. And so in closing, I just want to see if there's any questions here. In closing, I'd love to do a little rapid fire with you, which is always a fun way to end. So are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So on adventure.
Travel. I very much now want to travel all the time now.
Where's your next
For
place
the
that you want
world.
to travel to?
Where do I want to try?
Uh-huh.
Latin America is my next one.
Lovely. On going home.
It was so much a beautiful reconnection to just feeling like I belonged and identifying with my culture, which I felt I had lost along the way of trying to assimilate so much to American culture.
Lovely. What would you tell your 25-year-old self?
Start caring for yourself earlier. I think I only started thinking about it, much later on in life, but I think now pressures start earlier nowadays, even in middle school and high school. So self-care is a way to respect yourself and give more to the endeavors you really want to put yourself into.
And your belief on aging, how has that changed?
Oh, that's completely wiped away. I have seen too many age-defying things, in my journey. And, now I just don't, I have no belief on aging, actually. It's just completely wiped away. I don't even think about it.
That's so fabulous. I love that answer so much. And what is one thing everyone can do to improve their life?
Reconnect with nature. I think just step
Aw,
outside. We forget to do that.
yeah, we really do. Michelle, this has been such a joy, and you've touched my heart and my digestive system, I will say. And so here's the book again. You can order it. We put the link in here. I want to thank you for all of your research that you did because this really is um, a Bible for self-care, wellness, and longevity. And that if you want to do that for yourself, you buy this book. And it has, again, inspired me in so many different ways. Thank you for joining us today. I feel so grateful that the book just launched and here you are. So I really appreciate you joining us on Rebel 11.
Thank you for having me.
And for all of you who have joined us today, thank you. And there's so much more coming up. If you can go ahead and look at rebel11.com. If you're here in Seattle, we have an event next week on exploring your purpose and living in alignment, both personally and professionally, with what your purpose is, how your values are, and what your mission is. So we have several other things coming up and some global adventures, and take a look and reach out if you have any questions. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Michelle, have a beautiful day and best of success with your beautiful book.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.